All right, just making sure. All right, so gotta make sure I'm recording on Spotify here. So okay, take the mic off mute. I think we're ready. So today I'm going to be rebooking WrestleMania's golden years, 1985 till 1995. If you like videos like this, leave a like and subscribe. Videos uploaded every week. I'm probably not going to put the camera up, so let's get into it. Here it is. All right. So we're going to start with WrestleMania 1 all the way down to WrestleMania 11. So I feel like the first WrestleMania should have had a WWF title match between Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper for the title. That would have been perfect for that event. Mr. T and Mr. Wonderful could act as managers. Um, I don't know, was that discussed? I don't know. But Mr. T could still get physically involved in the match. But there was no need for him to actually wrestle um, at the event. To me, that was just overkill. I mean, it's really nothing against WWE, but that was just completely overkill. They could have accomplished getting mainstream press simply by having T involved in the match without him actually participating in the match. That's something they could have done. Now we get to WrestleMania 2. My only problem with this event is they used 3 different venues. But seeing as how it was the second WrestleMania, um, wouldn't 2 venues make sense instead of 3? That I don't get. They could have done it for 2 venues instead of 3. I don't know why they did 3 venues for that. 2 venues would have been just fine. It made no sense. Um, 2 venues would make more sense though. You know. So for WrestleManias 3, 4, 5, 6, perfect. Nothing to change here. WrestleMania 3 had the most logical and best booking of any of the WrestleManias. Hogan, Andre, Steamboat Savage, Hart and the Bulldogs. It was perfectly booked. It was a perfectly good booked event. The event was perfectly booked. A year later, Macho Man winning the title at WrestleMania 4 was much deserved after he and Steamboat put on the greatest match of all time that year prior. A year later, at WrestleMania 5, Savage versus Hogan was yet another well built up main event. And Warrior versus Hogan the following year was even better. I consider those 4 years to be one of WrestleMania's best. Now we get to WrestleMania 7. Okay, so with WrestleMania 7, here we have the first poorly booked WrestleMania up to this point. This one had mistakes written all over it. Here's the tag team situation for that year. LOD versus Power and Glory. Tenryu and Kato versus Demolition, Heart Foundation versus Nasty Boys, Rockers versus Haku and the Barbarian. Um, Rockers are my favorite tag team. I have to come out and admit that. Um, when Sean threw Janetti through the window, that window wasn't real glass. It was fake. It was a fake window. They used a fake window in that barber shop. It wasn't real. That's making a point there. But that's one talented tag team division. Unfortunately, none of them are paired up with the right dance partners. Here's how it should have been booked. LOD versus Demolition, loser leaves town match. They built this feud up from the moment LOD entered the WWF at SummerSlam 90. That's when they made their debut. Yet it never had any payoff at the major event. This would have been a proper way to write Demolition off of WWF TV as opposed to having them job out to an unknown Japanese tandem. Speaking of which, Tenryu and Kato should have faced Mr. Fuji's other team, the Orient Express. Now, I think that would have been a good match, Tenryu and Kato against the Orient Express. Tanaka and Kato, that was their names. Not only are they both a Japanese team, but the initials of the team members are both T and K. Finally, the Rockers should have defeated the Hart Foundation for the tag titles. That would have been a good match for that card. This was to be the Hart Foundation's final match as a tag team. So why not pass the torch and the titles to the Rockers when they've been buried their whole entire fucking career by Vince McMahon and the WWE? Instead of the newcomer Nasty Boys. Who would have been better off facing the team like the Bushwhackers? The Rockers had paid their dues and deserved to take over as the top spot in the tag team division with those titles. Now that the Hart Foundation's run was over, the Rockers could have easily had a 3-month reign as champions from April to June, then drop the belts to the Nasty Boys, who could then drop them to the LOD at SummerSlam 91. That's the way Vince McMahon should have done it. Now, he didn't do it that way. I don't know. It's like something against the Rockers. He had some vendetta against the Rockers. I don't know what it was. But the biggest mistake of all at WrestleMania 7 was the main event. Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter, when it should have been Savage versus Warrior. The reunion of Elizabeth and Randy is the moment most people take away from this event, and it's how the show should have ended instead of a career-ending match. It should have been a title versus career. We all knew there was no way Warrior was going to retire at that point. So instead of his career being on the line, have him keep the WWF title and defend it against Savage. That way it's Warrior's title versus Savage's career. That's the way they could have done it. I would have had Macho King win the Royal Rumble that year and advance the face warrior at Mania, seeing as how Macho King was ring royalty. He should have been a natural to win the Royal Rumble instead of Hogan. Um, Hogan's slaughter match didn't need to go on last, nor did it need to be the first title. To be, nor did it need to be for the title. That's what I meant to say. I didn't much care for the WWF exploiting the Gulf War, but if that's the route they were going to take, then just make it a no holds barred flag match. Hogan doesn't need to be every single main event competing for the title. So now let's talk about WrestleMania 8. I hope what I said made sense. You know. So let's talk about WrestleMania 8. Um, with that event, there was even more missed opportunities. Um, Hogan versus Sid, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ric Flair, Undertaker versus Jake the Snake Roberts, and Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper. Here's what here's what we should have got. Hogan versus Flair for the WWF title, Macho versus Jake the Snake in a cage match, Taker versus Sid, and Bret versus Shawn for the IC title. That should have been the card. Now, seeing how senile Vince McMahon was, he never understood that. So, Hogan versus Flair. The fact that this match never took place at this event tells me that one of them must have gone to Vince and told him that they refused to lose to the other person. Egos must have got in the way, I would assume, because I can't see any other reason for this dream match not taking place. As for the Macho Man Randy Savage, the match with Flair should have should have been saved for SummerSlam later that year. But at but at WrestleMania it should have been Savage versus but at WrestleMania, I'm going to say this, but at WrestleMania it should have been Savage versus Jake inside the steel cage. That that's the match that should have happened there to settle their awesome feud, which had been built up brilliantly for months, but never received the kind of major pay-per-view closure. It's so warranted, seeing as how this was to be Jake's last match for a long time in the WWF. It's only fitting that Savage be the one who sends him packing after everything Jake did to him. Not only attempt to end his career, but his life as well. But instead, they had Jake take on The Undertaker, which made no sense. Um, I mean, it was fine, but it made no fucking sense to have him wrestle The Undertaker. Completely no sense. But a better match would have been for Undertaker to take on Sid instead of him wrestling Jake. Sid had recently turned heel while Taker had recently turned face. Why not save both their turns for the same match and pull a double turn at WrestleMania, like Austin and Brett? Um, A few years later, a demolition in the Powers of Pain a few years prior. At, at last, but not at least, while Brett versus Piper was a very good match, I can't help but feel that Brett versus Sean that would have been a, would have made a lot more sense than him versus Piper. Both had recently left their tag team partners to pursue solo careers and compete in the IC division. And seeing as how, in my alternative universe, the Rockers and the Hart Foundation met the year before WrestleMania 7, um, it would only make sense to have the two breakout stars from those teams meet the following year. This should have marked the first of many future encounters between two men whose careers were so eerily paralleled with one another. So let's talk about WrestleMania 9. This is what I would have done for WrestleMania 9. You had too many people with too much egos back then. They don't know what the fuck they were doing. Um, WrestleMania 9. This was at Caesar's Palace. Um, Gorilla Monsoon looked ridiculous in a toga. I have to come out and say that he looked ridiculous. Um, Corey going to be haunted for saying that, but he looked ridiculous. So at the event, so this was an event that I can't help but feel had Ric Flair's name written all over it. If there was ever a WrestleMania to have Ric Flair walk out to Richard Strauss, also I can't pronounce that name. I can't pronounce it. This was the pay-per-view Flair was not a part of because he had lost a career match to Kurt Hennig. So he was not a part of this, which sucked. But unfortunately, Ric Flair had left the WWF just 4 weeks earlier. It would have had killed him to stick around for another month for WrestleMania so that he could have been given a proper send-off. Flair versus Perfect career-ending match from Raw in February '93 should have been saved for WrestleMania. Another match that should have been saved for WrestleMania was Shawn versus Marty Jannetty. The match took place at the Royal Rumble, but should have been saved for Mania. If they were going to bring Jannetty back in the late '92, why not save the payoff match for the biggest event of the year instead of giving it away at the Rumble where it would have only been overshadowed by the 30-man Battle Royal? Then there's Yokozuna and Hulk Hogan situation. The main event at WrestleMania 9 was a complete failure. It was a complete failure. That's the event that fucked Brett over. It sucked. So if they were going to have this take place at Mania, then why not just advertise it and build it up, and build up to it in the weeks leading up to the event instead of just slapping it on at the last minute out of nowhere. Hogan's return to the WWF because Money Inc. had beaten up his buddy Brutus Beefcake and badly wounded his face. Um, but why not have Yokozuna be the man to destroy Brutus's face via flattening him with several devastating bonsai drops? That would have been nice. Would have had a flattened Brutus beefcake. I would have loved to see that. Then have Hogan come back and take on Yokozuna. Because if you hurt Hogan's friends and you hurt his pride, that's not going to be good. So, if you're, I mean, now we get to the title match. Yokozuna versus Bret Hart. I don't think Yoko was ever a good opponent for Bret. Their style and sizes were just too different. Yoko wasn't a very complimentary opponent for Bret, so instead of having Yokozuna win the Rumble that year and go to meet Bret Hart, I would have gone with the narcissist Lex Luger, instead of having Luger's Rumble debut consist of him simply cutting a promo and posing in front of mirrors. Why not have him enter the 30-man Rumble and win it? It's not like he's a guy who needed to be slowly introduced to the audience. People knew who Lex Luger was and where he came from. Besides, WrestleMania 9 was all about ancient Rome and the Greek gods, so who better to play the role of a modern day Greek god than Lex Luger? And his ridiculously roided up physique. Luger's not much better in the ring than Yokozuna was, but at least he can move and be properly put in the sharpshooter. It's pretty hard to get a sharpshooter on Yokozuna. Plus, after Hogan left again a few months later, Luger was giving Luger was given a different gimmick when Hogan left. See, they tried to build Luger up as the next Hulk Hogan, and it did not work. So that's why they decided to put the belt back on Bret at WrestleMania 10, because it wasn't going to work. So now we get to WrestleMania 10. So this is the first WrestleMania since WrestleMania 6 to get it right. Shawn versus Razor, Owen versus Bret, Lex versus Yoko. There's really nothing to change here. All 6 guys were lined up with the right dance partner. Perfect booking. The only minor change I would have made would have been with Lex and Bret both getting title shots. Now, I would have changed that if I was a booker. Just have one of them win the Rumble that year instead of a lame draw. Have Bret and Owen be either have Bret Owen be for the title or have Yoko and Lex go at it, but I don't know. That was fucked up. Let's talk about WrestleMania 11. WrestleMania 11 wasn't that bad. So Undertaker had missed WrestleMania 10 with a back injury. He did not wrestle at WrestleMania 10 because of his injury. So I don't want to really rebook WrestleMania 11, and I don't really want to rebook WrestleMania 10. But WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 11, WrestleMania 6, WrestleMania 3 were all properly booked. It's just the other WrestleManias that sucked. So I'm probably going to end the episode. Now, if you thought I did a good job on this episode, leave a like and I'll